It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at The Beholder, number 2. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today, from May of 1979, this is The Beholder number 2. Hope you enjoy the video. Last week we started our look at a brand new fanzine from the UK. Mike Stoner and Guy Duke are the principal individuals responsible for this fanzine, which is called The Beholder. As I mentioned, there are several issues of this that came out basically monthly starting in early 1979 and continued for a couple of years thereafter. I have all these, and there's some bonus pamphlets that they put out that had some summaries or sort of like best of collections as well, which we'll look at. This, I think, will probably take us well into the second quarter of next year. Like, we'll probably finish this up if we do one every week, like in May. So we're going to be looking at The Beholder for a while, unless I decide to take a break and look at something else. Here's our cover art, and again, this is Guy Duke's art. And this fanzine is what we're used to. This is, as we've talked about before, I'll mention again the different printings. So this is my older one. It's a heavy stock cover, folded in half, stapled on the side. And this is actually, this tower that's drawn here is from the competition dungeon that is in this issue of their fanzine. So what are we going to have inside? Take a look at the editorial. They have a new class called the Loner, which follows up on last time when they had the Trickster. There's a short article on Traveler where he gives, which he said he bought a copy of to give it a try, and he had some suggestions on a few changes he thought they should make there. New monsters, some thoughts on combat, some just sort of discussion about the game and ways to play it, some new spells, Petrarch's Tower, which is the competition dungeon, and Magic Jar, which is going to be some new magic items. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, there are different printings of this. The only way you can tell is basically there's the color of the cover and more particularly the price that's on the cover. So this is the first printing of issue 2, and then I have a second printing or a first reprint, 45 pence, then 50 pence, then 55 pence as well. I think it goes all the way up to 60. Pardon me. So in the editorial, basically they give you their names again, sort of the distribution of responsibility, where a Guy does the dungeon and the artwork and Mike handles the business, and they both do several of the articles. I think Mike actually does most of the articles. He's also responsible for your subscription. It says, please write to Mike. If you want to give us a phone call, you can call Guy. I mean, they have their address and phone numbers in there. It's a different time period, right? We think this one's better than the last one. We hope you agree. And it gives you a little bit of summary of what's going to be in here. Ask people to contribute, and ask you to send in if you want to have like a contacts page, right? So if you're a DM looking for gamers or a player looking for DMs or whatever it is, you can send that in there, and they'll put that in there for free. He says some people thought like their magazine was too full of I guess serious information. He says, so if you want us to change something, then you got to let us know, and we'll potentially switch it up. Okay, so the Loner is their new character class. I thought the Trickster was pretty good. I think the Loner is well executed. Don't like the idea particularly at all. So the Loner is someone, as you might imagine, who is tends to stay off to him or herself. That's kind of a loner. It's a little bit like a ranger. He has a whole bunch of abilities. He needs 9 strength, 9 intelligence, 10 wisdom, 13 constitution and dexterity, and 9 charisma. His prime requisite is constitution, and he can get a 10% XP bonus if he gets that. He says this is intentionally an independent type of class for your player to use if you wanted to do a scenario where someone's off by themselves. I don't know why you do that, and if you did, I don't know why you wouldn't just play your normal character. But in any event, the Loner is sort of that freedom fighter who's out there taking care of whatever he or she thinks is right, well, fixing whatever is wrong in the world, right? Trying to make things right. They can be chaotic, good, evil, or neutral, or true neutral. And they can be male or female. They can be humans, elves, half-elves, or halflings. Demi-humans have some limits. They wear no armor, but they get improved armor class over time, sort of like a monk. They no shields, limited number of weapons, but he can use the short and long swords. That's kind of the most popular weapon in the game, I'd say. So he's not horribly restricted. In terms of magic items, he's fairly restricted. He can obviously no armor. He can do a cloak of protection. He can do a ring, any type of ring of control, invisibility, or protection. That's the only rings he can use. He can use the miscellaneous items that are usable by a thief, and basically that's it. No potions, no rods, wands, or staves. No other rings than the specific ones mentioned. No use of scrolls, right? So kind of that's a good limitation. And then he gets special abilities at each level. Stalk and hear noise, tracking, swimming and water breathing, resist cold, resist disease, resist fire, resist poison, infravision, 120 feet, willful healing, sort of like the monk's ability to heal himself, and fly, like literally I can fly through the sky. So they start out okay. The flying I think is kind of crazy, but stalking is basically the ability to follow something for a number of rounds equal to your level. If you can try and sneak around, basically hide and shadows, move silently combined kind of ability. Hear noise is the thief ability. Tracking is the ranger ability. Swimming is a little bit faster, and you add the water breathing, which is 1 turn plus 5 melee rounds per level. Resist cold, these resist things, right, will protect you against extreme low temperatures like the first level spell. Resist disease is sort of like the paladin. You just basically are immune to disease. It's not really resist, it's immune. Resist fire is like the second level clerical spell. Resist poison protects you from poison. I think it's basically like immunity based on the way they describe it. Infravision is just suddenly you have infravision. Healing as if you were a monk 2 levels lower. And flying speed 3 inches per turn plus 1 per level, 1 inch per level. 6 turns continuously at 10th level, and then you add 2 turns for every level above 10th, and then you have to rest at least that many turns before you can fly again. And then at 20th level, you just randomly get ultravision for a reason I'm not really sure about. D6 for your hit points, and plus 2 hit points at first level only. You get this natural armor class improvement that starts off at a 10 and then goes up about every level. Sometimes you hover for a couple, 3 levels, but by the time you are 15th level, you're armor class 2, and that's your best possible armor class. You can go a certain number of days without food or water. It starts off at 7 days food, 2 days of water. It goes up to a max of, you can go 14 days without food, 7 days without water. So that's the loner class. They don't particularly like to be around other people. They can build strongholds, but they won't be there for more than a month at a time. And they have to spend, I think, like half their time out and about roaming the world. So I don't think it really fits in very well in most campaigns. It might be kind of cool, just to think about, oh, this would be fun to do, but I don't think it's a particularly great character class for D&D. Okay, I skipped over the Traveler one. It's just got some suggestions for different weapons like SMGs, grenades, and some comments on laser beams. Here are our new monsters. The Catilia, a peaceful and friendly creature of the wilderness. They tend to try and stay away from people. They look like sort of like a centaur, except for the body, instead of being a horse, is a caterpillar. So it's a caterpillar with just like the human torso and head. And they're basically nature's shepherds. That's what they're particularly good at. They have animal telepathy. Their basic defense is to cause whatever animals they're shepherding to trample you, like to stampede and trample you, and then they try and run away. The albatross is literally just the normal bird. The wrinkle here is that they brought in this thing from literature where if you kill an albatross, then you get cursed. And the way their curse works, you lose 1 point of all of your abilities every hour until they reach 1. And then you get a save versus poison. If you fail, you die. If you succeed, you'll get those points back 1 point per week. You lose 1 point per hour, you get them back 1 point per week. So it's a pretty nasty curse. Next is the vampire bat, which is literally a cross. In this case, it's a cross between a vampire and a bat. They can fly around. They can't change form, but they're a bat, and if they bite you, they try and bite you in the neck. And if they do, they will latch on and start sucking out your blood. 2 to 5 points of damage. The first time they hit you, you lose a level, and then they just latch on and start sucking your blood out until you either rip them off or you die. Next is a creature called the ohm, like the term from electricity. It looks like a four-sided die, except for it has an eyeball on each of the faces and a little tentacle-like arm that comes out. And as you might guess from the name, the ohm is a creature whose body is naturally filled with electricity. If you make contact with him, those tentacles, they will do 2 to 4 points of sort of shocking damage. And if you hit him with a metal weapon, if you hit with a metal weapon and make contact, you'll do damage, but you'll take a shock of 1d6 points of electrical damage. So it's kind of cool creature. It has a movement rate, so I guess it kind of shimmies along somehow and moves around in the dungeon. Next, we have the snapdragon, which is a plant, animated plant, which are pretty cool. They have these heads that look like, or they say actually are like dragon heads. They bite for 1 to 6 points of damage, and some of them have the ability to do a fire breath weapon for 2d4 points of fire damage. You roll for the plant. It'll have anywhere from 4 to 20 heads. Each head takes 1d4 hit points of damage, and there's a chance when you cut off a head that the entire plant will sort of like have a system shock and die. They say 2% chance. I would actually make it like the first head maybe is 2, after the second head then it's 4, 6, 8, and add an extra 2% every time it loses a head. But anyway, that's just my particular idea. Next, we have a creature called the Juva, a large and slimy creature that looks like an umber hulk in shape and size, lives near swamps or rivers. It'll attack with 2 arm-like tendrils, so it doesn't look that much like an umber hulk. 2 tendrils that'll do 2d6 damage if they hit. He's covered in a liquid similar to a delusion potion, and when the Juva inflicts any type of damage, this fluid will get into your body, and you will not think you've been damaged, the player character. And so the DM keeps track of the damage that you have suffered, but he'll tell you you've been wounded, but you don't feel like you took any damage. And that's it. There's no save. But then you're down hit points and you don't know it. And the whole thought is the next time you get in combat, you might be 1 hit away from death. You don't know it. Oops, isn't that a fun surprise? And finally, we have this creature called the Moaf. And there's a human shaped Moaf and a dog shaped Moaf. It's made out of a white magical foam. Fire does extra damage to the Moaf. Normal weapons do half damage, and cold and lightning have no effect. It'll hit you with their hands, 1d8. And then if you don't save versus rod, staff, wand, you lose intelligence, 1d4 intelligence points, due to some type of an impulse that's emitted from it. If you take 7 points of intelligence loss in the same melee round, you'll go unconscious. And if you're reduced to 3 intelligence points overall in a battle, you'll go insane for 1d6 turns. If you go to 2, you become zombie-like. And if you go to 1, you will die. If you don't die, your intelligence will come back at 1 point every 6 turns, up to half of what you lost. And then you have to rest or get a cure disease spell or a wish to get the rest of it back. The dog Moaf is often there about 25% of the time, that it's loyal, and if it bites you, it'll do 1d4 points of damage and affects your nerve centers, cause your dexterity to go down by 2d4. It'll cause your dexterity to go down by 2d4, and your next attack will be at -4 because you're sort of suddenly losing coordination. So there are the new monsters. So our thoughts on combat, as he says here, combat is an essential part of fantasy role-playing games, and people have different views of it. He says, Dungeons & Dragons intentionally was drafted to have not really care so much about realism as sort of playability. Decently fast-paced, and it's sort of the ideas around combat are sort of designed to simulate rather than sort of perfectly replicate real life, right? But he says people bring in other ideas. You might want to use chivalry and sorcery if you want a lot of realism, as an example. As in the Arduin, Dave Hargraves rules. So, people now, it's very common to have critical hits. Some people have fumbles. He talks a little bit about how those are typically, how those typically work. Natural D20, natural 1. For what happens, and then obviously the critical hit is some type of extra damage. Some people even do like severed limbs or like really extreme damage. He recommends you take a look at Luke Pulsifer's article in White Dwarf number 8 if you're interested in critical hit tables. Arduin 2 is pretty good. And then the fumble course is either you drop your weapon, you break your weapon, you hit somebody nearby, that kind of thing. And so he also says, when what happens in D&D when you get a hit is you've actually penetrated the person's armor. It doesn't mean, in other times you're maybe not making contact. He says that's important to understand. For example, if you're the Ohm and on contact you cause that electrical shock, you don't really have to penetrate the armor. So you wouldn't get the benefit of plate mail, right? You'd only get natural 10 with dexterity or magic adjustments, and that would be the right armor class to use, which is an important point for people to keep in mind. And of course, he says, don't forget that dexterity can help. Okay, new spells. Our first spell here is level 1. This is from the Barad-dûr. I think that's a Tolkien reference. Spellbook. Fuse, level 1. This is like a fuse, like a burning fuse to set off an explosion. It's basically delayed blast. You cast a spell, and then you can get away from it. It'll last for 1 round per level. You can decide how many rounds from now you want it to go off. And then in that spot, the fuse will basically out of magic. Something will start to burn. And if you have something that'll light, it'll explode. Block transformation. This is level 4. And this can be cast on any creature. They get a save versus spells. If they fail, then they must remain there for the duration of the spell. And so it blocks your transformation, right? So you can't polymorph, you can't do gaseous form, anything like that. So it just completely stops your transformation. Water walking, level 2. As it sounds, this is a druid spell. You cast it on any creature, not just yourself, and then they can walk on top of any liquid. And then finally, the locator spell. It's a level 2 magic user spell, and it helps you determine something. You put it cast on a rock or a stone, and for the duration of the spell, which is 1 turn per level, the magic user will naturally know how to get back to that, like up or down, left or right, north, south, east, west. You'll sort of know where it is in space related to you. And he says, for example, it's a good way to trace your way back. If you're afraid of getting lost, you cast it on this stone, this rock, you leave it on the ground. As long as you don't run out of duration, you'll always know how to get back to that spot. So that's a pretty clever and useful spell, I think. All right, now we have our competition dungeon. Just to repeat briefly, because they said this last time, and I covered it in the video, their idea is to have a competition dungeon rather than something you drop in. So there's 2 parts to that. One, it's designed to be a 1-session sort of adventure. They give you pre-generated characters, and the idea is obviously that there are tasks or events that cause you to earn points rather than really experience. You earn like competition points. So the key is he gives you like 8 characters here. The DM's supposed to pick 5. And then again, the idea is you run these people through with 5 characters, and then you run somebody else through with the same 5 characters, because you got to have the same characters to keep it even. So the GM's got to decide which 5 they're going to use. And then at the end, they have things here to how you would earn your points. Gold pieces that you bring out, magic items that you discover, particular items that are important to the actual solving puzzles or key to the adventure, getting those, lots of points. Killing certain monsters, low-level monsters, a little bit of points. Bigger monsters, boss level monsters, whatever, more points. Figuring out tricks. tricks and traps, solving puzzles. Those kind of things all are great ways to earn points. And then there's some things that you're going to encounter in there. And if you do sort of what you consider to be the smarter, clever choice, in other words, this is not for murder hobos, then you can get points for that as well. And that's the bottom line, and that's sort of how the competition thing works. And again, it sort of does require the same DM. You're going to use the same pre-gens, and you have groups of 5. And so actually not sure how helpful that is, meaning how many people were sitting around saying, I wish I had a new dungeon, but not to run with my normal group. I actually run a competition with different groups of players, right? I don't know that that was actually a very common need at the time. It doesn't make the dungeon, in my view, doesn't make the dungeon any better or worse. I think all these things are drop-in, possible dungeons. Here's our map. And so here's our background. Petrarch was an evil magic user, and he set up his tower in this pass up in the mountains, and he sort of built it out. There's like a sheer cliff, and he's found these stairs that went down into this area. He dug out a little bit of a dungeon, and then he built his tower like up, almost like hanging off of the cliff, right? So it's basically impossible to get to his tower. Peopled the dungeon with creatures, denizens, evil stuff, right? So no one would sneak in and try to get to him. He conducted all kinds of experiments and tried to create all kinds of weird things. And so the things that survived, he's stuck in here in his dungeon. And so one of the cool things I like about it is there are a number of, I'll call them new monsters or variations on monsters. And he doesn't really describe them like you would a normal monster. He's just like, hey, in this room there's this thing. He tells you what it is and how it's going to interact with the characters when they find it. But doesn't really, like, there's no separate section where he talks about the new monsters that are in here. They're in the room as if it's okay and you're expecting to read random stuff. So anyway, the magic user is dead, but he's alleged to have had an heir who has been in here. The local townspeople have discovered this staircase, the 3,000 stairs that descend down to get you into the entrance of this dungeon. There's a group of hobgoblins that have been preventing anybody from getting in there. But you guys are brave, and so your group's going to set off and try to solve this. We try to break into this tower and defeat all the monsters that are in there. So pretty straightforward. Here's a dungeon. Your job, go in and take care of business. Again, I like this one quite a bit. I liked there's a few really interesting traps. He's got sort of 3 sections. There's an entrance area that's sort of carved, then there's some caverns, and then there's the tower itself. Definitely one evening you're going to get done with this, no problem. Like most of their competition dungeons, they tell you it should be on a timer. So the other part of that is like maybe you give them 60 turns or you play for 2 hours, whatever you want to decide to do. But basically that's part of the scoring system is, time's up. So wherever you are, that's how far you got. So I don't know. I mean, it would be, I think with people I typically play with, this could easily be 2 to 4 hours long. There's a decent amount of combat. There's puzzles. There's things they're going to have to stop and talk about or think about. But this one's really, I think, quite good. To me, it all hangs together pretty darn well. There's a couple of things you're like, why is this monster just hanging out in here? But they tell you, that the magic user basically put him there and told him to stay. And so I guess that's the explanation. That's all the explanation that you need. Petrarch's Tower and the Vaults of Experimentation. Then we have the Magic Jar, new magic items. A number of things here. These are some good, some just okay. So here's the first one. This is a rug on the floor. This is the anti-gravity rug. I like it quite a lot. This rug basically has an anti-gravity field being emanated from it. And so if a character walks across it, it's like an anti-gravity field, like the magic user spell. Everybody goes up. I like it just, in the dungeon, there's just, you describe the room, there's a rug, blah, 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 blah. Characters walk in, they don't ever think about the fact they're walking on a rug unless they're afraid maybe it's a trapper, right? And so they walk across this rug and up the ceiling they go. Now this guy in the drawing's got spikes up there. If you put spikes up there, they might notice that and avoid it. But I think clever dungeon masters can actually think of some better stuff to do with, say, a 20-foot high ceiling or whatever. And the other thing, of course, they describe is the characters might roll this thing up. When it's rolled up, the field's contained, and so you could roll it out in front of a monster and try to get him to come to attack you, and then he'll go flying up into the air. So it's a little challenging probably to deploy in combat, but anyway, it's a clever item with lots of fun uses, I think, down the road. Snake arrows. Magically enchanted arrows. In mid-flight, they transform from normal-looking arrows into snakes. If you hit, then that means they successfully bit you. When they hit at the end, 1d4 points of damage, 10% chance they also cause poison, which you get a saving throw against. And then they're just basically a snake, and they'll keep biting you, until they take maximum damage. They have 1+1 hit dice, and incredibly, when you do the damage to the snake, it'll just turn back into an enchanted arrow again, not broken. So I don't know about that, but that's how they've written it up. Whoops. So nothing for this one. These are called firestones, hugely sought after by hobbits, really anybody that uses a sling, but remember, hobbits are particularly good with a sling. And when they hit, they explode like a 6 hit dice fireball. I think that's too much, but I like the idea that that they explode. They're one-use items, so there's going to be some limit, to that in my view. I think 6d6 is probably too much. Maybe 2d6, maybe 1d6. I don't know, of extra damage, because you give them maybe you give them the impact from the stone and the explosion. So I'd tune it down a little. It's a cool item though. And then finally, the Shield of Drilling. Clever, useful, but I don't know that I want to walk around with this thing. So the shield that you have basically has a giant metal cone, like you've seen those drilling machines, that sticks 2 feet out in front of you. So you're carrying that thing, walking through the dungeon with this giant cone in front of you. Now, you use the magic word or you touch the magic spot, it'll spin, and you got like ball bearings in there, so your arm stays set, but this thing spins and you press it into any substance, stone, rock, concrete, whatever, bricks, anything, and it's magic, and it'll just drill right through it. It says it'll make a 20-inch hole, and as long as you're pushing it and pushing it forward, it'll just keep drilling forever. So all kinds of clever uses to that. Big enough for any party member to crawl through if necessary. And again, I don't want to carry that thing through the dungeon, but there are lots of circumstances where a clever party would probably be pretty glad that they had it. All right, now our dice. The augury dice. 13 wisdom required to use. You have 2 choices. You can ask yes/no questions. There's an 80% chance that the dice, when rolled, will give you the correct answer, whether it's a yes or a no. Obviously, the DM has to do that for you. Or you can ask, will this proposed course of action be good or bad for us? 75% chance that the dice, when thrown, will give you an accurate answer to that question. I think it's kind of a cool item. Curse dice. Once you roll these dice, the curse dice, you get a save versus poison. If you fail, you're going to be a compulsive gambler. You can try to save once a week to break the curse, and then of course get rid of the dice. But otherwise, you're looking for every opportunity to bet. You're going to try and bet on everything. If you have a chance to bet, you cannot resist. You will always say yes and bet, and keep betting until you lose all your money. I like it. It can be some pretty fun role playing. All right, our next item, the drawing is just awesome. 7 league boots used by characters with a strength of 9 or greater. They allow the wearer the power to step 7 leagues, 21 miles, in a turn. It's accomplished because they actually have you, when you step, you move through extra dimensional space. Sort of some super physics kind of thing going on there. But there's a 10% chance that you go the wrong way, and a 5% chance that you get completely lost. So that's not so good. Insulating armor is even more than what it says. A very thick protective set of armor protects you from heat, cold, electricity, adverse weather, insect attacks, etc., etc. I don't know what the etc. covers. But really good armor, and it's super protective, probably too protective with all those different things it protects you from. And it says, and if you can find a helmet that goes with the insulating armor, then it basically becomes a self-contained, spacesuit. Like you have clean air in there, so you'd be immune to gas attacks as well, and have an unlimited amount of oxygen, so you could go underwater in this thing. It's that's probably a little too much in my view. Oops, we're not ready for those rings yet. All right, the Dispel scroll has the words of a spell written backwards. When you read it, it will dispel the effects of that, whatever spell was written backwards, the closest one in effect. So if there was a fire, if it was going to dispel a fire trap, the closest fire trap to you gets dispelled, no matter how far that has to go, right? It's a little wonky, not sure when you'd think it's a very specific item that you might carry around for years and never use. But in any event, that's what it is. Okay, next we have the automatic sword +2 weapon. Has holes for gems. You put gems in there. It's intelligent. It'll like you because you put fancy gems in there. Consider you the master, and it's basically a dancing sword, but you got to bribe it with the gems first. And then we have the cursed sword, and he says you can't put it down until you obviously remove the curse. Whenever you hit an opponent, it will stick to the opponent and your hand, and you can't let go. And now you're stuck to this guy until he's dead. And so now you got to use your offhand, and you can't get away from this guy. So that's a pretty bad curse, but I think it's kind of fun. Okay, now we're ready for our rings. The weather rings. Only usable by druids. They have different colors that allow you to control different aspects of weather. Red, heat or the sun. Blue, cold or the wind. White, snow. Gray, rain and storms. And gold, all types of weather. So that's that. And then, so the first one I think was the weather, and then here's one that's controlling the fire, the heat and the sun. I think that's supposed to be fire. Next we have spell potions, and basically it's a 20th level magic user in his campaign can do this with time and money. You put a spell into some liquid and you put it inside a bottle, and whenever you open it, that spell goes off. So if it's a fireball and you open it, it just right there, it explodes. It does the effects of this guy, whatever caster or level he was, fireball. So that's good if you knew that and you threw it, right? And what he likes about it is it gives the spell, anyone can use this because only certain people can read scrolls, but anyone can use potions, or pretty much anyone can use potions. And so it gives everyone the ability to have some spell casting sort of effects or abilities. I think these things are super expensive. It costs 10,000 gold pieces. That's the cost of the magic user in his campaign to make them. So imagine he's probably charging 20 to 50,000, I would think, to sell these things to you. So super expensive. But anyway, that's the spell potion. It's an interesting idea. I might do it in some more limited context, and I would not probably let my magic users do this. Of course, I don't have any 20th level magic users running around anyway. Wand of Enfeeblement has a little button, shoots a ray of enfeeblement, just like the magic user spell. Pretty straightforward. All right, this one I like. These are the pipes of the forest. When played, they have the effect of the spell Call Woodland Beings, the 4th level druid spell. Anyone can do this. A range of 150 feet. If you're a druid, extra 10 feet per level. If you're a bard, an extra 15 feet per level. Have to have a 13 dexterity in order to have the skill to actually play these things and make them sound good. I think that's pretty cool. It's pretty minor ability, pretty limited usage, but that's a good magic item in my book. Next is Holy Armor. It's been blessed by some high-level priest or some demigod, avatar, something like that. Anything that's not lawful good that touches it takes 2d6 damage. That would include any monsters that are attacking that aren't lawful good. Undead creatures who see it are affected by the aura of this magical, amazing armor. They save versus poison. If they fail, they will flee. So it also protects the wearer from all level drain effects of undead, which is always, pretty cool. All right, so finally, this is a glove, or as they call it, a gauntlet. And this is the lightning gauntlet. Each of your 4 fingers can cast a lightning bolt once a day, which that's okay. 66, I think, is too high. Again, I just think these things overpowered, especially if they're going to be lower level characters. But it's kind of a cool thing. I'm not sure how you figure out the different finger pointing techniques, but in any event, that's what you get. 1 finger once per day. And you can't save them up for next day. If you don't use them, you lose them. Okay. Here's our rear cover. Just like last time, information about advertisements, copyright, requesting contributions, information for subscriptions, and other information if you want to make contact with them. And a little plug here for the fanzine called Demonsblood, which of course we've done videos and covered those. And if you remember, Demonsblood plugs The Beholder when Mike Stoner had written an article in their fanzine, and they indicated, hey, Mike's going to have his own fanzine. You guys should be looking for The Beholder, etc. So they gave him a little plug back. That's our look at The Beholder number 2. Again, I think this is just a really solid fanzine. For me, at least, it's the kind of stuff I like. Whether they're, good, bad, mediocre. I like new monsters. I like new spells. I definitely like new dungeons. I think, those are great things. They got some thoughts in there, some, sort of commentary for the player or the dungeon master to think about how they're playing the game. Just everything about it, I think, is the kind of stuff you're looking for in a classic D&D fanzine from this era. Hope you guys are enjoying the video series, and I hope you're subscribed. If you got some friends who would enjoy our content, please send them our way. We're trying to build our subscriber base. That's it. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.